Chapter 12, Part 2. The next morning, the night after Vivian's unforgettable drunken visit to his apartment, Gregory woke up after his few hours of sleep, feeling exhausted. In his dream, he had held Vivian for hours and hours, reliving all of his overwhelming desires of her, and torturing himself with her sweet nearness until he wanted to kick a hole through his wall. He reached out for her hair ribbon, which was now lying on the table beside his bed, and he moved the smooth length of it through his fingers as he stared at the ceiling in the pre-dawn darkness, wondering what had possessed him to ask Vivian's mother if he might court her daughter. He had not had a plan to ask for this. It had been almost entirely spontaneous in him, and now that he had asked, he wondered if it was not a kind of evidence of him not being as morally strong as he needed to be. If he had been truly holy, he would not have asked. As the trite saying went, had he won the battle only to have lost the war? He knew he had no business courting Vivian Prevet, but he also knew that, in order to keep seeing her and to be allowed to be alone with her, this was the necessary next step, because, as Wolf had so tactlessly pointed out, this was how the world worked. At some point, though, the expectation would now presumably hang on him to make good on his intentions, and to make Vivian his bride. He could get out of it by running away, or by staging his death, or perhaps by saying he had changed his mind, but it was not going to be pleasant in any case. For a moment, he let himself fantasize that he could find a way to make good on his stated intent for courtship, that they could be together in a fairy tale future where all things, no matter how unreasonable or unlikely, could come true. Then he came back to his reality and berated himself for what now seemed to be a horrific mistake. Well, her mother could always say no, or Vivian could turn out not to want him when sober. It was surely foolish to begin to contemplate any of this when they had yet to go on any rendezvous, their early visits to the Café du Monde notwithstanding. If they were meant to court, Vivian and her mother would acquiesce. If it was not meant to be, they would say no, and that would be that. He would just have to wait and see. The feeling of having set irreversible forces into motion filled him nonetheless with trepidation, aligning perfectly with his unadmitted motto of, "It's never too early to begin worrying." As soon as it was day, Gregory got himself down to the store so that he could talk with Wolf. Wolf, who most likely never slept at all, although they had never spoken about it, was already up and about. "I'm sorry that you had to walk in on that scene," said Gregory to Wolf, meaning it both as an apology and as a statement of fact that he wished Wolf had not walked in on them, stirring up all those eddies of sin and desire in his wake. "Ah, Gregor, sit down for a moment if you have the time," said Wolf. Gregory dutifully sat down. "Do you remember at the beginning, when I first met you, how we spoke extensively about self-control and the many contributions that daily order and personal restraint make to allowing this kind of life of ours to be, despite all, a happy one? Well, now I wonder, aren't you taking self-control a bit too far? No man could take what you are taking. You are holding yourself to an unreasonable standard. Ah, and then you fall in love so easily, and so deeply, with the fragile and transient beauty of this world. It is one of your most sublime personal characteristics, but it is also one of your least helpful. You mentioned something about speaking urgently about information that Anastasia had shared with you, said Gregory, brusquely changing the subject. He was not going to have this entire conversation a second time. If he had to hear again how this would only end up in someone's bedroom, his hands were now free to pound the stuffing out of Wolf. Yes, and my apologies, said Wolf. I want to remain in friendship with you, Gregor. But you be kind to yourself as well, and go easier on yourself. That is all I wanted to say there. Anastasia came by yesterday evening, when she arrived in the city, and told me several things, most of them disturbing. The situation in Europe is dreadful, as it has been for years, but now with the war in Spain going, and Hitler and Mussolini and Stalin making a mess of it everywhere else, it does look as if war is likely to spread again. The kind of pressures that the government in Austria is under, fighting to stay independent, it is noble and futile. And the word among espionage circles is that independence is unlikely to last much longer. Espionage circles? Asked Gregory, surprised. What exactly did you think it was that Anastasia was doing in Copenhagen? Replied Wolf. You see, she is a patriot, just like you. Yes, for the enemy. And the front-line cavalry has always been fine enough for me. I would never stoop to espionage, said Gregory haughtily. But he was surprised nonetheless. He always thought of spies as bland, unassuming men with mustaches, who would blend in and go unnoticed. Anastasia was about as unlikely to go unnoticed as a giraffe wrapped in bright pink gauze. It had to bring additional risk to her work. I imagine she is making very significant contributions, said Wolf. And as for the enemy, isn't there some old wisdom about the enemy of my enemy being my friend? His wrinkled face contorted into a wry smile. But that is not what I wanted to tell you. There are 2 pieces of important news. The first is that the rector of the Faculty of Literature and History at the University of Innsbruck will be retiring in June, and he is the one that I personally entrusted my books to. The second is that in May there will apparently be a rare book auction in San Francisco of works owned by the late Otto Kreutz. Wolf paused and looked at Gregory, apparently waiting for a sign of recognition. Gregory scanned his memory, a thing quickly done since there was not that much to go through, and turned up nothing. I'm sorry, did we discuss this before? Asked Gregory. The book, Gregor, the book! The one I have been seeking all these years. The one about the origins and purpose of longevity and the true nature of time, replied Wolf excitedly. Now the gears of Gregory's memory clicked into place. This is that passionate project of yours, am I right? You have been looking for this one book for years, and you almost found it when someone else— Otto Kreutz, interjected Wolf. When Otto Kreutz got there first. I confess, I always thought you told me that story just to make yourself interesting. So there is such a book? Asked Gregory. Yes, there is. Written by the 17th century Belgian sage Pieter van Aerts. It is supposed to explain many things that I would much want to know. In all of these years in the antique book trade, I have been waiting for this book to come into my hands, said Wolf, moving the book press over and sitting down across from Gregory at the table. If you just wanted to read it, Then why didn't you ask this Otto fellow if he could show it to you? Waiting all this time to find out what is written in one book, it seems likely that you might be disappointed by what is actually in it. If you don't mind my saying so, this is the kind of impractical thing that you would accuse me of, Gregory said. Well, you are not entirely wrong there, admitted Wolf. It does seem like a kind of foolishness, but I have read accounts of individuals who have seen this book, and if even half of what they say is true, well, I simply have to see it for myself. And as for Otto Kreutz, that pompous fool, he always refused to meet with me, and I decided I would simply outlast him. As it appears, I now have. So you can see that I feel I must go out to San Francisco for this auction, because there is a chance that this book will be among the items in the sale, and if so, then I must at least try to acquire it. I'm thinking that if you can watch over the store for 2 weeks in May while I'm out, then we can close the store for the summer and go out to Austria for my other books in June. I can manage the store in May, as long as you will not ask me to make any of the book repairs myself. That could lose you more customers than closing for a few additional weeks, said Gregory lightly. Wolf laughed. No, agreed, no major repairs. But if you can glue in a torn page here or there, that would be nice of you. I suppose I could. Here and there. Have you decided what you will do with your books once you get them back from the university? Probed Gregory. I am not sure how many books we are talking about, but I am hoping you are not thinking we should leave extra room in our luggage to throw them in for our trip back here. Wolf laughed. Some of these books are almost priceless. I do not think we will be throwing anything into luggage. No, I was rather thinking that we would get them out of Austria and over into Switzerland, where I have several bank vaults that could hold them for now. I don't mind packing a few boxes and carrying them somewhere. But are these the kind of items that can just be carried out of Austria without any challenges at the border? Inquired Gregory calmly. Well, no, you are right. I think this will need some finesse, admitted Wolf. You mean smuggling, said Gregory. Conveniently, you now have a well-skilled Soviet spy visiting you, so you can get some assistance with the necessary logistics. Wolf shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Yes, well, that is true. You have read my mind. It will not be easy to get these books out of Austria, especially these days, when the Germans are staring over the border and sticking their noses into everything. Anastasia's visit comes at the perfect time to get some much-needed consultation. I will speak to her about all of this, and then we travel out in June. I should think we would be back by end of August, and then I could reopen the store in September. It works out perfectly then, said Gregory. But June is so far away still. I am worried that I may wait too long, that things will only be more difficult the longer I wait. Or maybe it is the other way round, and it would be more prudent to wait a bit longer to see how the political situation develops. But if I delay beyond June, then I would also have to deal with a new rector for the literature and history faculty. It seems that I find myself neatly hedged in, sighed Wolf. June it is, then, said Gregory. I will be glad to go with you in June, and to watch over your store in May. Wolf looked over at him and smiled. Thank you, Gregor. I am most grateful. Then Wolf pulled out his pocket watch. I told Anastasia to come by my apartment this evening. Are you free to join us, if your little mademoiselle won't be keeping you too occupied? Gregory frowned, the warmer feeling that he had had when Wolf had smiled at him and thanked him, now starting to dissipate again. I am free to join you, he said. I generally visit Mademoiselle Pravette and her mother on a few afternoons a week. I'm not in the habit of calling on them in the evenings. Oh, very well, then. It is arranged. I look forward to having you come at around 11 o'clock, said Wolf, standing up. And not to worry. It will not be a total loss of an evening, even if we bore you to tears with talk of politics. Anastasia looks simply stunning, Wolf added with a smile. I'd rather look at you, said Gregory sarcastically. Yes, I'm sure, said Wolf. I love it when handsome young men tell me that. Now are you ready to take down the new supplies list we need? Oh, and write down tonight at 11 o'clock at my place, or we will wait and you will never show up. Gregory took out his pocket notebook and jotted down the evening appointment time, and then all of the items. Then he went out, jumped on his bicycle, and the day moved on quickly after that. His mind kept returning to Vivian, to the evening that he had had with her, and to the question that he had left with Vivian's mother about being permitted to call on Vivian as a suitor. What a moment that would be when he would go and ask Vivian if she would have him for a beau. Their friendship had already started to change, he realized. Both the moment in his kitchen when Vivian had discovered his lack of plates or foodstuffs, and the moment when she had staggered through his door, drunk and vulnerable, had created situations of discomfort and uncertainty between them, but had at the same time given birth to a far greater degree of intimacy between them. She now knew things about him that he had wanted to hide. And now, if Wolf was right, he now knew things about her that she may not have yet even admitted to herself, about the nature of her feelings for Gregory. Was this how people came closer together? Through mutual discomfort and fear? He wondered. He was so lost in his thoughts that he rode right past the street he needed to take to get to the paint and varnish store, and he had to turn around and go back. He spent most of the day in an unfocused haze. In the early evening he went out for a solitary stroll, then pulled out his pocket notebook and sat by a window at a table in a cafe in the French Quarter, and wrote some more notes to himself for his journal as he watched the people moving out in the street until darkness fell. And then he headed out into the early night to take care of a small meal for himself. He had eaten last night, so he would probably be all right, but just as an extra precaution, there was no point in coming to Wolf's hungry, so that Wolf could point out to Anastasia Gregory's cooling hands and fingertips beginning to turn bluish, and describe him as an example of a creature so failed as to not even be able to take basic care of itself. From his previous meetings with Anastasia, he knew that she was the kind of harsh, punctual, almost militaristic creature that would look down on someone who smelled like drink and who looked like he was barely dragging himself through life. So he went home and scrubbed up in the bath and put on a crisply starched shirt before he made his way over to Wolf's. Wolf opened the door, welcomed him, and took his hat and coat. Anastasia was already inside, looking out the window, with her back to the door. She was wearing a clingy white satin gown that left her entire long, smooth back bare. Anastasia was never cold. She started her days backstroking through the Volga, presumably after having broken the ice on it in winter with her high heels, or possibly with her teeth. Her shoulders were athletic and impressive. Her dark hair was now cut modernly short, adding to her demeanor as a woman of action. She was not interchangeable, of course, with the woman who had once toyed with him for a few months and then left him. But there were so many similarities that it was always more than a bit off-putting for Gregory, and he gulped. Wolf returned from having put Gregory's hat and coat away, and found Gregory still in the doorway, staring at Anastasia's bare back. "Oh, come now, don't be shy, Gregor. Come inside." He reached around and closed the door behind Gregory. Anastasia, presumably tired at last of having her goddess-like backside admired, turned to face him as if she had just discovered that Gregory was there, which was obviously not possible. "Gregor, it is good to see you once more," she said. Violet eyes. He had forgotten about that. There was probably not a more devastatingly beautiful woman in all the wide world. Well, unless it was the other one. Her voice was low and rich, and her Russian accent was as strong as her shoulder muscles. He saw that her long, painted fingernails were holding a drinking glass. "Anastasia, how do you do?" he said, bowing low. "It has been a long time. You look marvelous. What is the glass for? Have you decided to take a bourbon after all, while you are here in Louisiana?" She gave a small, curt laugh. "Vodka, Gregor. I have changed my views since we last met. Stalin is currently purging all of the non-drinkers from the Politburo, don't you know? Nothing is more suspicious in Russia than a teetotaler, and it was impeding my career. Moreover, I determined that all of the liquor drinking did not slow you down much, so I thought I would give it a try." "Hasn't slowed him down much? Ha! Don't you know it has made his memory like a sieve?" asked Wolf, shaking his head disapprovingly and moving towards his brilliantly lit dining table. "I don't think that is the source of his memory troubles," said Anastasia, slinking towards the table herself now, coil after white satiny coil, like a snake. She was as tall as he was, Gregory noticed. "It's probably all those falls from horses in his early years, as he once told us. Anyways, I still rarely drink, but when I do, it's this." And here she tapped her long fingernails so hard against the bottle on the dining table that it rang like a bell. "What's this?" asked Gregory, walking over to look at it. The label was covered in Cyrillic text. For all he knew, it was Moscow drain cleaner, and Anastasia was trying to do him in. "It's the best vodka in the world. Only very high party officials are ever served this," said Anastasia, seating herself slowly and carefully, as if her posterior was made of breakable glass. Gregory watched her with interest, trying to determine if this was supposed to be seductive, or if it was a case of hemorrhoids. Anastasia saw him watching, and smiled. It was probably not hemorrhoids, but he could always wish that it was. "I take it that you are a very high party official, then?" asked Gregory, sitting down and letting her pour more of the vodka into her glass, and then hand it to him. "Don't insult me, Gregor. I am above all of that, and I owe allegiance to no man," said Anastasia in an arrogant tone. "Do your espionage colleagues know this?" asked Gregory mildly. "Children, stop bickering! I feel like I'm presiding over a kindergarten with unruly youngsters at table. I knew I should not have allowed any alcohol here," despaired Wolf. "Yes, you never let me bring any here or have anything at the table. Why does she get to?" asked Gregory, sniffing at the clear liquid, and then taking a gulp. Not bad, this stuff." "I brought it as a gift," said Anastasia. "Everyone does that in Russia." "But you know Wolf does not drink, so I can only assume that this is a gift for me," said Gregory, adding a sickly smile, just for his own enjoyment. "Or it could be that I knew I wouldn't need it to get through an evening with you," snapped back Anastasia, her violet eyes blazing with temper beneath her dark eyelashes. Oh, wow, but she was glorious when angry, Gregory had to reluctantly admit. It made him remember exactly how he had fallen before, with the other one. He had gone down without any fight. Mortal men, unprepared for what they were dealing with, would probably drool on Anastasia's lethal, dagger-heeled shoes. "I give up," sighed Wolf resignedly. "This will be a long evening. Will you two lovebirds stop chirping at each other long enough to let the game begin?" "That's right. You can have me later, darling," said Anastasia in her exotic accent, and with a smile over at Gregory that showed every one of her teeth, even the ones in the back. "For now, we must restrain ourselves at the table." Gregory rolled his eyes and poured himself another suddenly much-needed drink. He had hardly gotten a sip down when she reached over, grabbed the glass from him, and drained it in a single gulp. So much for that. He pushed down the sensation of a freshly bruised ego, and looked longingly at the bottle, and wondered if they would end the evening with him just swigging straight from that. But then Wolf cleared his throat and brought Gregory's attention back to the card game, which was just beginning. They had to refresh Anastasia on the rules, and then they were off. Anastasia, failing to adapt herself to the social custom of her host, proceeded to play with all of the hard competitiveness of one challenge to the death. At least she refrained from conversation then, though, so that was a good thing. The light of all those candles in the silver candelabra reflected off of her bare arms, and the gems at her earlobes sparkled brilliantly. Her neck, long and pale and slender, remained unadorned. Everything about her was breathtaking. I have been here before and know what lies on the other side with a creature like this. But poor, foolish men of New Orleans, look out, thought Gregory. The tarot game ended with Anastasia winning, and she won the next 2 games as well. Gregory found himself missing Carl, with whom he could at least have whispered what a fool she was making of herself. Not that Anastasia wouldn't have heard him. Her senses were so acute, she could probably hear a mouse pissing in a corner. But at least Carl would have happily agreed with him. Then, eventually, after Gregory had stolen the glass back and helped himself to more vodka, Wolf indicated that it had been enough and they could move over to the sofas. Anastasia sat down in that same ridiculous way again, and then leaned back against the cushions, the fine shape of her torso emphasized by the tightness of her satin gown. Gregory thought again about his temptation the night before, and he realized that here was an extremely beautiful woman he could probably touch every inch of if he made the right appreciative noises this evening. But he did not want her. At the same time, the more vodka he drank, the harder it was to not look at her. A self-declared admirer of painting could not stand by unmoved while contemplating the glories of a Rembrandt, and neither could a self-admitted admirer of beautiful women fail to enjoy the landscape that Anastasia so carelessly rolled out before him with full intention that he should look and admire. As long as she didn't try to touch him and didn't say anything, he could probably look at her forever, without tiring of the scenery. Satisfied that she was being adored, she looked over at Gregory through half-closed eyes, all but purring. He didn't think she minded the view back in his direction much either. Too bad that eventually she always had to open her mouth and say something rude and ruin the temporary détente between them. "So, do you still go to the theater and then sit there surrounded by beautiful women, Gregor, as was your custom?" asked Anastasia. "No, I have given them up. I found it was distracting me too much from the intellectual content of the performances," retorted Gregory. "And on the intellectual front, I am proud to say that I have recently rewritten Keats' poem Eve of St. Agnes to my own satisfaction." Anastasia gave a loud, annoying laugh. "Pardon me, but for the moment can we leave off discussing Gregor and his ladies? I want to know more about the news from the old world," interrupted Wolf. "Well, you asked about the war in Spain," replied Anastasia. "I was there for a few months, on assignment. Things are rapidly going from bad to worse. Just recently, I saw things at the siege of Madrid that looked like the Russian Revolution all over again. We never really make any headway, I think." "Then why even bother with the espionage work?" asked Gregory. "Well, I have to do something," said Anastasia, looking over at him with a smoldering glance. "I don't have a bookstore to keep me busy, and even my nights can get monotonous, would you believe it? I need something to do." "Ah, so you do it for sport," said Gregory. "Certainly. I hope you do not think I do it for the love of Mother Russia. Even if that were true, I would not want to have such a sentimental reputation." Anastasia laughed again. "But tell me, Gregor, if Uncle Sam should get himself into another war in Europe, you would go and fight again? Am I right?" Gregory shrugged. "I hope we would be wiser in America than to go and do it again. And if not, that at least I would be wiser. It would take a lot for me to go and re-enlist. Nothing that I am currently aware of in existence could induce me." "Gregor still has shrapnel in his leg from the last war, I believe," explained Wolf. "Ooh," crooned Anastasia, turning to stare at the wrong part of Gregory's trousers. "You will have to show me later." Wolf and Anastasia then launched into a lengthy discussion on the political state of Europe. Gregory, who only gave 2 thoughts to Stella in a year, filled the time with admiring Anastasia, albeit in a purely theoretical and abstract way. Their conversation went on for a while until Wolf finally asked, "Tell me about what is new with Dieter. Has he not considered getting out of Munich yet?" The last time I asked him this, he said, "Why leave now? It was just getting interesting," said Anastasia. I think he was being sarcastic. "Oh, that sounds like him," agreed Wolf. "I need to write to him and see if he will be around for us to pay him a visit in the summer. I will go to that Otto Kreutz auction. Thank you for letting me know about that. And then in June I will go to Europe. Gregor will be coming with me. I am very worried about Austria, as you know, and about my books." "I saw books burnt for warmth in Spain last winter," said Anastasia. Wolf shuddered, as if that were the worst image of war that he could conjure in his mind. "I have to get my books out of Innsbruck and into Switzerland," he said. "How can I smuggle these books out of Austria? Can you help and think of a way?" Anastasia threw her head back and looked up at the ceiling. The smooth curve of her neck was a glorious thing to look at, just like the other ones had been. "Give me a moment," she said in her resonant voice. Gregory and Wolf looked at each other and waited. Anastasia ran a hand through her hair, the way a man might do, took a deep breath, and then sat back upright. "Listen, it will be easy," she said, leaning forward. "It can be done like this." Before the evening was out, they had a rough outline of a plan sketched out. Anastasia could be many things, but being inept was not one of them. Gregory had to admit that the quick cleverness of her mind far outshone his own. He looked over at her and caught her looking back at him. Our Russian Catherine the Great had 2 famous lovers named Grigory. Apparently, they were rather satisfying. They must have been, because she was with them far longer than she was with any of the others. The others never lasted very long, Anastasia said, giving him what he assumed she thought was a flirtatious smile, but which in fact looked far too predatory to pass for flirtatious. Yes, but I'm not so sure that it worked out all that well for either of them," replied Gregory cautiously. "Oh, come. I know you are impatient to spend some time with me, Gregor, but what I have to tell you is that I have to take a trip to Washington, D.C. first. I will be away for the next 3 weeks. You can take me out and show me your endearing little town when I return." "I will wait as best as I am able," replied Gregory, standing up from his seat. He thanked Wolf for the pleasant evening, thanked Anastasia for her visit, got his hat and coat, and let himself out, eager to be home again, and to have the social demands on him be over for the day. Back in his apartment, Gregory poured himself a bourbon, lit the lamp in his study, and sat down to read through his poem of the Eve of St. Agnes. It was not flawless, but at least it was clear what was going on now. As it now read, while no doubt light years away from the brilliance of the original full version by Keats himself, it was certainly a far improvement on the original remaining material, if Gregory said so himself. It was true that his view might have been biased and possibly unjustified, but with bourbon in hand, he thought it wasn't too shabby. Here is what the typed pages on his desk now showed. St. Agnes' Eve. Ah, bitter chill it was. The owl, for all his feathers, was a cold. The hare limped trembling through the frozen grass, and silent was the flock in woolly fold. Numb were the beadsman's fingers while he told his rosary, and while his frosted breath, like pious incense from a censer old, seemed taking flight for heaven, without a death, past the sweet Virgin's picture, while his prayer he saith. His prayer he saith, this patient, holy man, then takes his lamp, and riseth from his knees, and back returneth meagre, barefoot, wan, along the chapel aisle by slow degrees. The sculptured dead on each side seemed to freeze. Imprisoned in black, purgatorial rails, knights, ladies, praying in dumb oratories, he passeth by, and his weak spirit fails to think how they may ache in icy hoods and mails. Northward he turneth through a little door, and scarce 3 steps ere music's golden tongue flattered to tears this aged man and poor. But no, already had his death bell rung. The joys of all his life were said and sung. His was harsh penance on St. Agnes' Eve. Another way he went, and soon among rough ashes sat he for his soul's reprieve, and all night kept awake, for sinners' sake to grieve. That ancient beadsman heard the prelude soft, and so it chanced, for many a door was wide, from hurry to and fro, soon up aloft, the silver snarling trumpets 'gan to chide. The level chambers, ready with their pride, were glowing to receive 1,000 guests. The carved angels, ever eager-eyed, starred where upon their heads the cornice rests, with hair blown back and wings put crosswise on their breasts. At length burst in the argent revelry, with plume, tiara, and all rich array, numerous as shadows haunting fairily the brain, new stuffed in youth with triumphs gay of old romance. These let us wish away, and turn soul-thoughted to one lady there, whose heart had brooded all that wintry day on love, and winged St. Agnes' saintly care, as she had heard old dames full many times declare. They told her how, upon St. Agnes' Eve, young virgins might have visions of delight, and soft adorings from their loves receive, upon the honeyed middle of the night, if ceremonies due they did aright, as, supperless to bed, they must retire, and couch supine their beauties lily white, nor look behind nor sideways, but require of heaven with upward eyes for all that they desire. Full of this whim was thoughtful Madeline, the music yearning like a god in pain. She scarcely heard, her maiden eyes divine fixed on the floor, saw many a sweeping train pass by. She heeded not at all. In vain came many a tiptoe amorous cavalier, and back retired, not cooled by high disdain. But she saw not. Her heart was otherwhere. She sighed for Agnes' dreams, the sweetest of the year. She danced along with vague, regardless eyes, anxious her lips, her breathing quick and short. The hallowed hour was near at hand. She sighs amid the timbrels and the thronged resort of whispers in anger or in sport, mid looks of love, defiance, hate, and scorn, hoodwinked with fairy fancy, all amort, save to St. Agnes and her lambs unshorn, and all the bliss to be before tomorrow morn. So, purposing each moment to retire, she lingered still. Meantime, across the moors had come young Porphyro, with heart on fire for Madeline. Beside the portal doors, buttressed from moonlight, stands he and implores all saints to give him sight of Madeline, but for one moment in the tedious hours, that he might gaze and worship all unseen, perchance speak, kneel, touch, kiss. In sooth, such things have been. He ventures in, let no buzzed whisper tell. All eyes be muffled, or 100 swords will storm his heart, love's feverous citadel. For him, those chambers held barbarian hordes, hyena foemen and hot-blooded lords, whose very dogs would execrations howl against his lineage. Not one breast affords him any mercy in that mansion foul, save one old beldame, weak in body and in soul. Ah, happy chance! The aged creature came, shuffling along with ivory-headed wand, to where he stood, hid from the torch's flame, behind a broad hail pillar, far beyond the sound of merriment and chorus bland. He startled her, but soon she knew his face, and grasped his fingers in her palsied hand, saying, "Mercy, Porphyro, hie thee from this place. They are all here tonight, the whole bloodthirsty race. Get hence, get hence! There's dwarfish Hildebrand, he had a fever of late, and in the fit he cursed thee and thine, both house and land. Then there's that old Lord Maurice, not a whit more tame for his grey hairs. Alas me, flit, flit like a ghost away. Ah, gossip dear, we're safe enough, here in this armchair sit, and tell me how. Good saints, not here, not here, follow me, child, or else these stones will be thy bier." He followed through a lowly arched way, brushing the cobwebs with his lofty plume, and as she muttered, "Well-a-day," he found him in a little moonlight room, pale, latticed, chill, and silent as a tomb. "Now tell me, where is Madeline?" said he. "Oh, tell me, Angela, oh, by the holy loom, which none but secret sisterhood may see, when they St. Agnes' wool are weaving piously." "St. Agnes, ah, it is St. Agnes' Eve, yet men will murder upon holy days. Thou must hold water in a witch's sieve, and be liege lord of all the elves and fays, to venture so. It fills me with amaze to see thee, Porphyro. St. Agnes' Eve, God's help, my lady fair the conjurer plays, this very night. Good angels her deceive. But let me laugh awhile, I've mickle time to grieve." Feebly she laugheth in the languid moon, while Porphyro upon her face doth look, like puzzled urchin on an aged crone, who keepeth closed a wondrous riddle book, as spectacled she sits in chimney nook. But soon his eyes grew brilliant when she told his lady's purpose, and he scarce could brook tears at the thought of those enchantments cold, and Madeline asleep in lap of legends old. Sudden a thought came like a full-blown rose, flushing his brow, and in his pained heart made purple riot. Then doth he propose a stratagem that makes the beldame start. A cruel man and impious thou art! Sweet lady, let her pray and sleep and dream, alone with her good angels, far apart from wicked men like thee. Go, go! I deem thou canst not surely be the same that thou didst seem. I will not harm her, by all saints I swear, quoth Porphyro, or may I ne'er find grace when my weak voice shall whisper its last prayer, if one of her soft ringlets I displace, or look with ruffian passion in her face. Good Angela, believe me by these tears, or I will, even in a moment's space, awake with horrid shout my foemen's ears, and beard them though they be more fanged than wolves and bears. Ah, why wilt thou affright a feeble soul, a poor, weak, palsy-stricken churchyard thing, whose passing bell may ere the midnight toll, whose prayers for thee each morn and evening were never missed? Thus plaining doth she bring a gentler speech from burning Porphyro, so woeful and of such deep sorrowing, that Angela gives promise she will do whatever he shall wish, betide her weal or woe, which was to lead him in close secrecy even to Madeline's chamber, and there hide him in a closet of such privacy that he might see her beauty unespied, and win perhaps that night a peerless bride, while legioned fairies paced the coverlet, and pale enchantment held her sleepy-eyed. Never on such a night have lovers met, since Merlin paid his demon all the monstrous debt. It shall be as thou wishest, said the dame. All cates and dainties shall be stored there quickly on this feast night by the tambour frame. Her own lute thou wilt see, no time to spare, for I am slow and feeble, and scarce dare on such a catering trust my dizzy head. Wait here, my child, with patience, kneel in prayer the while. Ah, thou must needs the lady wed, or I may never leave my grave among the dead. So saying, she hobbled off with busy fear. The lover's endless minutes slowly passed. The dame returned and whispered in his ear to follow her, with aged eyes aghast from fright of dim espial. Safe at last, through many a dusky gallery, they gain the maiden's chamber, silken, hushed, and chaste, where Porphyro took covert, pleased amain. His poor guide hurried back with agues in her brain. Her faltering hand upon the balustrade, old Angela was feeling for the stair, when Madeline, St. Agnes' charmed maid, rose like a mission spirit unaware, with silver tapers light and pious care. She turned, and down the aged gossip led to a safe level matting. Now prepare young Porphyro, for gazing on that bed. She comes again, like ring-dove frayed and fled. Out went the taper as she hurried in. Its little smoke in pallid moonshine died. She closed the door. She panted, all akin to spirits of the air and visions wide. No uttered syllable or woe betide, but to her heart was voluble, paining with eloquence her balmy side, as though a tongueless nightingale should swell her throat in vain and die heart-stifled in her dell. A casement high and triple-arched there was, all garlanded with carven imageries of fruits and flowers and bunches of nut-grass, and diamonded with panes of quaint device, innumerable of stains and splendid dyes, as are the tiger moth's deep damasked wings. And in the midst, 'mong thousand heraldries, and twilight saints and dim emblazonings, a shielded scutcheon blushed with blood of queens and kings. Full on this casement shone the wintry moon, and threw warm gules on Madeline's fair breast, as down she knelt for heaven's grace and boon. Rose bloom fell on her hands together pressed, and on her silver cross soft amethyst, and on her hair a glory like a saint. She seemed a splendid angel newly dressed, save wings for heaven. Porphyro grew faint. She knelt, so pure a thing, so free from mortal taint. Anon his heart revives, her vespers done. Of all its wreathed pearls her hair she frees, unclasps her warmed jewels one by one, loosens her fragrant bodice by degrees. Her rich attire creeps, rustling, to her knees. Half hidden like a mermaid in seaweed, pensive awhile she dreams awake and sees in fancy fair Saint Agnes in her bed, but dares not look behind, or all the charm is fled. Soon, trembling in her soft and chilly nest, in sort of wakeful swoon, perplexed she lay, until the poppied warmth of sleep oppressed her soothed limbs, and soul fatigued away, flown like a thought, until the morrow day. Blissfully havened both from joy and pain, clasped like a missile where swart paynims pray, blinded alike from sunshine and from rain, as though a rose should shut and be a bud again. Stolen to this paradise, and so entranced, Porphyro gazed upon her empty dress, and listened to her breathing, if it chanced to wake into a slumberous tenderness, which when he heard, that minute did he bless, and breathed himself, then from the closet crept, noiseless as fear in a wide wilderness, and over the hushed carpet, silent, stepped, and 'tween the curtains peeped where, lo, how fast she slept. Then by the bedside, where the faded moon made a dim silver twilight, soft he set a table, and half anguished threw thereon a cloth of woven crimson, gold, and jet. Oh, for some drowsy Morphean amulet! The boisterous midnight festive clarion, the kettle drum and far-heard clarionet, affray his ears, though but in dying tone. The hall door shuts again, and all the noise is gone. And still she slept, an azure-lidded sleep, in blanched linen smooth and lavendered, while he from forth the closet brought a heap of candied apple, quince, and plum, and gourd, with jellies smoother than the creamy curd, and lucent syrups tinct with cinnamon, manna and dates in argosy transferred, from Fez, and spiced dainties every one, from silken Samarcand to cedared Lebanon. These delicates he heaped with glowing hand on golden dishes and in baskets bright. Of wreathed silver, sumptuous they stand in the retired quiet of the night, filling the chilly room with perfume light. And now, my love, my seraph fair, awake. Thou art my heaven, and I thine eremite. Open thine eyes, for meek Saint Agnes' sake, or I shall drowse beside thee, so my soul doth ache. Thus whispering, his warm, unnerved arm sank in her pillow. Shaded was her dream by the dusk curtains. 'Twas a midnight charm, impossible to melt as iced stream. The lustrous salvers in the moonlight gleam. Broad golden fringe upon the carpet lies. It seemed he never, never could redeem from such a steadfast spell his lady's eyes. So mused the while, and toiled in woofed fantasies. Awakening up, he took her hollow lute, tumultuous, and in chords that tenderest be. He played an ancient ditty, long since mute, in Provence called La Belle Dame sans Merci, close to her ear, touching the melody, wherewith disturbed she uttered a soft moan. He ceased, she panted quick, and suddenly her blue afraid eyes wide open shone. Upon his knees he sank, pale as smooth sculptured stone. Her eyes were open, but she still beheld, now wide awake, the visions of her sleep. There was a painful change that nigh expelled the blisses of her dream so pure and deep, at which fair Madeline began to weep, and moan forth witless words with many a sigh, while still her gaze on Porphyro would keep, who knelt with joined hands and piteous eye, fearing to move or speak, she looked so dreamingly. "Ah, Porphyro," said she, but even now thy voice was a sweet tremble in mine ear, made tunable with every sweetest vow. My body seemed the lute you played so clear. How changed thou art, how pallid, chill, and drear! Give me that voice again, my Porphyro, those looks immortal, those caresses dear. Oh, leave me not in this eternal woe. Do find solution sweet, or else I die, I know. Beyond a mortal man impassioned far at these voluptuous accents, he arose, ethereal, flushed, and like a throbbing star, seen mid the sapphire heaven's deep repose. Into her dream he melted, as the rose blendeth its odor with the violet. Taking her in his arms, she loosed his clothes, and soon beneath her soft, warm coverlet they lay, half shy, and then anon their gazes met. "What did you dream, sweet Madeline, my love?" asked he, his voice a low and trembling flute. "Speak to me of this vision from above. Come show me how thy flesh becomes the lute. Show me its strings, the vines where pleasure's fruit doth ripen, where the music rings with bells. For I would caress thee as would serve and suit, become as he who in thy dream doth dwell, and in thy perfect ear all prayers of love to tell." "Ah, Porphyro," sighed she, closing her eyes, "this is the voice that so bewitched before. Thy lips catch mine, thine each kiss glorifies the passion that throughout mine limbs doth pour, yet every kiss doth serve but to inflame me more. Be there mayhap a way where worship flee, where I thou also couldst wholly adore, not saint nor priest, but as co-regents we within this secret kingdom joined as one may be." These words she spake, sweet fire engulfed him whole. Naught would suffice but that he should possess all of her beauty, all of her single soul, all of her slender grace and loveliness. He fervent kisses to her skin doth press, arms folds about her, lovers in embrace, melting, all blending, yielding each caress, each touch, each tear upon that lovely face, as like a drop of honey warms her nakedness. And then, with one small sound, the walls break loose, unravel at the corners. Heaven shows its star-filled canopy above them. Zeus hath struck with his pure lightning. In its throes they fly like baffled birds, blissful, exposed, yet thrilled anew at each small movement sweet. Moan whisper soft. Meantime the frost wind blows, like love's alarum pattering the sharp sleet against the window panes. St. Agnes' moon hath set. 'Tis dark. Quick pattereth the flaw-blown sleet. This is no dream, my bride, my Madeline. 'Tis dark. The iced gusts still rave and beat. No dream, alas, alas, and woe is mine. Having possessed, thou leav'st me here to pine. Cruel, what traitor could thee hither bring? I curse not, for my heart is lost in thine, though thou forsakest a deceived thing, a dove forlorn and lost, with sick, unpruned wing. My Madeline, sweet dreamer, lovely bride, say, may I be for aye thy vassal blessed, thy beauty's shield, heart-shaped and vermeil-dyed. Ah, silver shrine, here will I take my rest, after so many hours of toil and quest, a famished pilgrim, saved by miracle. Though I have found, I will not rob thy nest, saving of thy sweet self. If thou think'st well, to trust, fair Madeline, to no rude infidel. Hark, 'tis an elfin storm from fairyland, of haggard seeming but a boon indeed. Arise, arise, the morning is at hand, the bloated wassailers will never heed. Let us away, my love, with happy speed. There are no ears to hear, or eyes to see. Drowned all in Venice and the sleepy mead. Awake, arise, my love, and fearless be, for o'er the southern moors I have a home for thee. She hurried at his words, beset with fears, for there were sleeping dragons all around, at glaring watch perhaps with ready spears. Down the wide stairs a darkling way they found. In all the house was heard no human sound. A chain-drooped lamp was flickering by each door. The arras rich with horseman, hawk, and hound fluttered in the besieging wind's uproar, and the long carpets rose along the gusty floor. They glide like phantoms into the wide hall, like phantoms to the iron porch they glide, where lay the porter in uneasy sprawl, with a huge empty flagon by his side. The wakeful bloodhound rose and shook his hide, but his sagacious eye an inmate owns. By one and one the bolts full easy slide, the chains lie silent on the foot-worn stones. The key turns, and the door upon its hinges groans, and they are gone. Aye, ages long ago, these lovers fled away into the storm. That night the Baron dreamt of many a woe, and all his warrior guests, with shade and form of witch and demon and large coffin worm, were long benightmared. Angela the old died palsy-twitched, with meagre face deform. The beadsman, after 1,000 aves told, for eye unsought for, slept among his ashes cold.